Chapter 229 to 231. Rocky had already entered her hybrid form by the time she reached the ground. She spun in the air and landed on her feet lightly. Shortly, the others also landed beside her. The Shandians came flying with their wings. The automatas came flying with the boosters in their palms and feet, and Yamato ran here by stepping onto air, an ability of her Zoan. Immediately, a large number of the eyes present turned to them, each of them widening. 150,000 soldiers against 14 Einherjars. 6 Sins, 1 Yamato, and 7 automatas. It was honestly risky, no matter how strong they were. However, they had a plan, and this time Rocky made sure to follow it. Big Mom's fight showed her the reality. Ignoring the shocked gaze that soon turned hateful, she glanced at her side, smirking. Guys, now. At her order, Yamato, Hancock, and Wiper nodded. Then a burst of their conqueror's haki painted the whole place in a hue of red and blue, red of Wiper and blue of Yamato and Hancock. People cried, the island shook, and many fell to their knees. Some who were standing had grave expressions. Monkey D. Garp glared at them while Sengoku stared at the group sternly. Meanwhile, Edward Newgate had his eyes at the group of 14 silently. Soon a grin emerged on his face. The cow hadn't died yet, but the crows are already here? He laughed in his iconic way. These brats. It seems he has been too laid back these days for some kids to come to the battlefield, his battlefield. With a clench of his jaws, his own conqueror's haki burst out, this time creating a purple dome. Rumble. The sky split in two. The 3 domes of conqueror's haki shrunk in front of the behemoth's will. Hancock was the first to stagger, but she stood still nonetheless. Whitebeard's dome was still not enough to match the wills of 3 upbringing individuals. However, from Marine's side, the man with his braided goatee took a step forward and released his own will in front of the Marines. Normally, Conqueror's haki burst can only burn people's will, as Shanks had put it, but Sengoku was different. Because of his Buddha fruit, he could encourage people with just 2 words, and he could mix that power with his haki. This created a will-healing effect, causing the people who had already fallen to their knees, and even some who lost consciousness, to stand up again. Whitebeard groaned and stopped his burst. At the same time, the Einherjars did the same. At least they also realized that it was useless. There was a reason why Whitebeard didn't use his conqueror's haki to damage the other party from the get-go. Even in the canon timeline, it was because Sengoku would have repaired their wills immediately, so it was only but a waste of stamina. It seems whoever came up with the plan, possibly the Sky Emperor, didn't know about this ability of Sengoku, and it was justified. After all, how would a chicken know about his dinosaur ancestors? Whitebeard then shrugged his shoulders. If this was the canon timeline, this would have been the moment when Mihawk would have thrown a sword slash towards him, which would have been defended by Jozu. But instead, this was when Whitebeard's lips twitched as his eyes landed on Yamato. Why was that girl here? He suddenly recalled that Yamato had something she wanted, so if Ace died, she wouldn't be able to get it. Then does that mean she was on his side? He was proved wrong immediately as the girl rushed to him, her club coated in the cracking black lightning, just like that kid Kaido, as she swung it towards him. "It's time for round 2!" As her club came closer to his face, Whitebeard just groaned. She was as annoying as Kaido in his younger days. A part of him wanted to hit her in the head knowing that this girl's father was the reason his little brother, Kozuki Oden, died. But a part of him opposed that. A child was never to be blamed for her father's action. That's one of the reasons he is here to save Ace to begin with. But of course, he couldn't just take the hit head on, and he didn't have to either. A bird covered in wild blue fire appeared between him and Yamato. His claws stopped Yamato's club swiftly, though it did cause his fire to flicker. "Pops would like you to stay back, little girl," Marco the Phoenix stated with one of his eyes closed, an ethereal smile on his face. Yamato tried to protest, but Marco swayed her away from there. Whitebeard ignored her and turned to the Einherjars. "Where is the Sky Emperor?" Whitebeard had a hard time believing that Amon would send his sins by themselves, even if the old man knew barely anything about Amon. He didn't care, though. He was here for Ace, not to fight that kid or his crew. He would only hit them if they attacked him first. That Yamato girl doesn't count. Whitebeard was about to go down on the battlefield, however. The sound of multiple ships coming in his direction caused his head to snap back. Multiple battleships entered through the giant gate in front of Marineford, coming towards the battlefield through the part of the sea that wasn't frozen by Aokiji. With clenched jaws, Whitebeard spread his observation haki to see who exactly was coming, and from the deck of the ships, 3 figures caught his attention. His eyes widened in a pleasant surprise as a grin emerged on his face. The figure of Buggy the Clown, standing beside a certain Silver's Rayleigh and Scopper Gaban, waved at him, causing many old emotions to emerge in his heart as he laughed a heartful laugh. They might have been enemies once, but Whitebeard did not doubt that they were on his side today. "Let's see who stops me from taking Ace back. Gurarara!" Edward Newgate jumped down from the top of Moby Dick, the ice cracking under his feet as he walked over to Ace as if taking a stroll. Aokiji ran to Whitebeard to land a blow made of an ice spear, however. The man with grayed-out hair, Rayleigh, dashed to him in an instant. It's been a few weeks since he last got his injury from Kizaru, so he has healed a lot, and was confident in keeping a few admirals busy, and maybe, since it concerned the life of his captain's son, it was finally the time to show why they called him the Dark King. Scopper Gaban didn't know Roger had a son, heck, he didn't even know that his captain had a wife. Roger only met Rouge after he disbanded the crew, so from the crew, only Rayleigh knew about Portgas D. Rouge and her son, Ace, since Roger went to meet the man once before his execution. However, just a few days ago, Scopper Gaban received a letter from an anonymous sender, explaining to him about Ace, who was soon to be executed. Gaban was mostly sure it was a trap made by Marines to capture him. But if in the wildest chance, Ace was really Roger's son and he died just because Gaban didn't go to the war, he didn't know how he'd come face to face with his captain in the afterlife. If by any miracle, Ace was actually Goldie Ace, then Scopper Gaban would have a hearty talk with the young man. His gray bushy ponytail fluttered in the air, and he struck down a Marine vice admiral with one of the 2 axes in his hands. Blood splattered as Gaban chuckled at Whitebeard, who he was running beside. "Gyaha, old man! Look at what you have done to yourself!" Gaban stared at the countless wounds on Newgate's body, while Whitebeard had a fierce grin on his face as he smacked a group of Marines away. He laughed. "Gurara, Gaban! Your hands have gotten rusty. In the old days, you only needed 1 axe for a vice-admiral." He watched Gaban using both his axes to cut another Marine, which caused the man to click his tongue. Whitebeard grinned in silence, running forward. "Yet you came," Gaban scoffed, but he was grinning too. "Whitebeard, you are the only person I know who Captain Roger bowed to. Heh, if you called me before, I wouldn't have refused." He laughed. "But don't get ahead of yourself, old man. Today I am here for that boy, not you." Whitebeard gave a heartfelt laugh and added, "Fine, brat. Listen, I can't go to Ace, because if I do, Garp or Sengoku would jump in. I will take care of the small fries, you take care of that girl Yamato over there, and tell Marco to fly and fetch Ace." Gaban clicked his tongue again. "Tsk, ordering me around as if I am in your crew." Unlike his click of the tongue, Gaban didn't look offended at all, and instead chuckled and left from his side, crashing on the little girl Yamato. By now, the Sins were fighting the Marines who the Whitebeard pirates resisted, along with the 50,000 more people, the prisoners, who came here merely by the voice of Rayleigh and Gaban. Just like how they followed Buggy and Cannon, but this time in a larger number. Speaking of Buggy, the man was filming the war, streaming it in all the corners of the world, just like in the Cannon. Even with the larger army of 2,000 water people against them, none of the Sins were having a hard time fighting, but the endless stream of soldiers was still annoying. In the midst of this all, Rocky was the only one struggling, because her enemy was the strongest swordsman alive, Hawkeye Mihawk. Seeing Scopper Gaban, Amon too, who was on top of the car made of clouds, couldn't help but grin. Quaha! His new laugh was kind of annoying, but the fact remained still. Now 2 of Roger Pirates were here. A few days ago, he learned about Rayleigh's capture from his mindless puppet, Hina. Silver's Rayleigh almost died, but Kizaru didn't take his life. It was clear why. Rayleigh is the most important member of Roger Pirates alive right now, so if the Marines could make the man talk, big secrets would come to the daylight. In such a case, why would an admiral kill the man? Instead of capturing Rayleigh, killing him would have caused even Kizaru some trouble from higher-ups. That's the reason Amon assumed why Rayleigh was even standing today, and that's honestly not a bad thing. And Gaban. The mysterious letter was actually sent by Amon. Amon has a large information network, not at the level of revolutionary, but still great. Using that, finding Gaban was a matter of months, and then he just simply sent the letter at the right time. His plan was to gather as many Roger Pirates as possible at this place and then kill them all by his own hands. However, unfortunately, he could only get to Gaban. Finding the others was basically impossible, except for that doctor in Reverse Mountain, but that man didn't come even after Amon sent him a letter too. The guy probably knew even if the letter was telling the truth, he'd only be a burden at the war. With a small grin, he watched over the battle. Kaido is coming this way too. This time, Amon's face darkened a bit. From the conversation the original Amon was having with Shanks, it seemed they'd need a while. In that case, things could get dangerous. As for why it would get dangerous even though he, Amon too, was here, the answer would lie in how the lightning clones work. This world wasn't Naruto, and the clones weren't made of chakra. All clones were just puppets controlled by one mind, and all of them were super light, didn't have muscles, and thus had no actual strength. The clones could only do lightning attacks, but even that split in the number of clones active, which was currently 4. Moreover, the clones couldn't use Haki. Haki's source is his main body. If Amon could project it so far from his body enough to use it on a clone, then he wouldn't even have had the talk with Shanks, because he would have been a master at Haki. So clones had hardly any physical strength, they couldn't use Haki, and finally their lighting was nerfed, so nerfed that a vice admiral would barely be scratched by an Elthor. Amon, after awakening, could use 1.5 billion volts, a straight 500 million jump. But being in 4 clones, each Amon could use 375 million volts, except for the original who could use his full power for whatever reason. Well, Amon 2 shrugged. No 4 is going to reach here soon with Vivi. Amon 3, who freed the prisoners, went back to Skypea for any emergency, and Amon 4 was coming here with a beast of his own. He then closed his eyes, concentrated his observation Haki to find Yona, and sent a signal in her brain, causing the girl to flinch, but she got her composure back immediately. Yona nodded to herself, as she was surrounded by multiple prisoners. She was grabbing their shadows and tearing them apart, which caused the men to immediately start burning under the sun. The shadow fruit was basically anti-life in a battle zone like this. Most prisoners had fled from her, but some stayed. The ones who simply didn't care about their life after spending a lifetime in Impel Down. Die! Yona dodged an attack. From the signal she received, she knew it was the time to unleash the demons of hell. As the prisoner with a knife on his hand slipped past her, she crouched down, touching her shadow on the ground, and immediately her shadow expanded, creating a pool of darkness. It was different from the smoky one of Blackbeard, but still similar looking. The next second, disfigured zombies started to pop up one by one after another, dead bodies of different sizes that were given life by the wicked power of shadow soon filled 1/5 of the battlefield. What? This caused even the few fearless prisoners to take a few steps back. They didn't fear death, but they feared ghosts for some reason. Back when Amon killed Moria and his crew, he didn't kill Hogback, the mad doctor, who is now serving under him to make zombies like these. The zombies weren't slow, they weren't dumb either. They followed their queen, Yona's mental order, and started to tear, chew, and bite the enemies immediately. However, right then, "Oh! Shadow fruit, is it?" Kizaru, the Light Logia admiral, stood in the air with his finger pointing at Yona. Yona froze immediately, fearing a beam at light speed would tear her apart if she made a wrong move. Kizaru's finger shone in brilliant yellow light, and he was about to shoot the beam of light right at Yona's forehead, but right then, as Yona clapped her hands, a huge zombie of a woman jumped out off the field of the shadow the moment Kizaru's light flashed towards Yona. Instead of Yona, the light hit the huge woman, causing smoke to rise, which dimmed soon, and when it did, Kizaru's heart skipped. "Mama, Mama!" A hag with a big nose, pale, sickly skin, who wore a pink dress and had stitches on her neck, seemingly connecting her head to her torso, laughed like a beast. "Die, Kizaru!" The strongest hag kicked the ground with her huge body and appeared in front of Kizaru, one of the fastest man alive, whose eyes widened. Big Mom was a shadow zombie? At that moment, Kizaru almost believed they're going to lose the war, but then, "Waroro!" Big Mom's fist couldn't touch Kizaru as a man with similar body size as she leapt down from the sky, a club on his hand that crackled with black lightning. The club hit Big Mom in the face, causing the zombie of the old hag to crash down onto the frozen sea. Lin, look what they have done to you!" At that moment, Kizaru was sure they were playing a losing game. When the Sins appeared out of nowhere, Sengoku was about to slam his head against a wall. He only calmed down when he realized there was no Amon around. He couldn't sense him even after stretching his observation haki to its limit. That gave him a bit of hope. The Sins might be strong, but they still didn't pose the threat of an emperor. But now? Now that Kaido jumped in from the sky, Sengoku felt his heart halt briefly. What the hell was happening here? He instantly regretted the idea of this public execution right then. He wanted to lure Whitebeard, and only him. Now there were 2 more emperors involved. 3 of the living 4 emperors were here. However, he couldn't feel better knowing Shanks wasn't participating. In fact, it stung him knowing Shanks wasn't here. Because if the redhead had come here, the Marines would actually have someone on their side. That much Sengoku could tell. There was another matter at hand to worry about. Big Mom was here, even if dead, she was here. It also didn't seem like she was any weaker either. She in fact seemed stronger, if anything else. That whispered a question. How was she stronger without her homies? She was somehow overpowering Kaido in strength. How exactly was she doing that? There was a reason behind it that Sengoku didn't know. Big Mom was an emperor. Her dead body would need the shadow of one or multiple strong people to make her into a proper shadow soldier. So, Amon used her own children against her. The few Big Mom children he didn't kill were all used in experiments. Almost all of them failed the experiments, yes, but only a few died. They were now mindless beasts, disfigured creatures like the numbers from Beast's pirates, but they had their own use. Locking them in a dark prison inside New Thriller Bark, Yona simply stripped them of their shadows and mashed them inside their precious mama's dead body. In canon, when many shadows were put inside Luffy, he had become Nightmare Luffy. Big Mom didn't go through that level of change since most shadows were used just to start her up, but she was certainly stronger than her alive counterpart, at least physically. Unfortunately, she couldn't use haki. Normally, if a dead body who knew how to use haki in their lifetime were given a strong shadow, he'd be able to use haki even as a shadow soldier, but that's not the case for Big Mom. Haki is all about will, A shadow soldier lacks that said will and only receives it from shadows that are inside them. In Big Mom's case, she is stuffed with people's shadows who are basically in a coma. They couldn't have any will. In fact, Big Mom was moving only because of her natural instinct. Sengoku felt relieved seeing Big Mom not being able to use haki and in the end, slowly getting overpowered by Kaido. Crack! Bam! Kaido dealt a devastating blow on Linlin's head using his Thunder Bagura, causing a wound to open up in her forehead, but no blood dripped. She was a dead body after all. Kizaru had by then moved away from the two raging emperors. Sengoku wanted to curse at that coward, but if he was in his place, also considering he was as weak as Kizaru, he would have done the same. All the whilst, Whitebeard was keeping busy with dozens of vice-admirals, and Yona had backed off to other enemies. That girl was dangerous, truthfully. She was practically erasing the battlefield with an eraser at this point. If she isn't stopped, this would be bad for both sides. Sengoku tapped on his walkie-talkie, sending a call, which was picked by a man wearing a sadistic grin. "That redhead, you mean?" From his eyes, he could see Doflamingo pointing at Yona with a grin before frowning after he had explained his orders. Sengoku wasn't sure if Daffy would listen to his command, but it was worth a try. "Cuckoo, of course. I have been looking for an opportunity to pay back the Sky Emperor. Now that Kaido is here on the same battlefield, I am not scared." Scared. Doflamingo, the heavenly demon, was scared of Amon. Did Sengoku miss something? Then again, he missed many things when Amon was in the subject. Amon always knew if there was a spy, and in case he was feeling particularly lazy to kill the spy, he got out of the spy's sight in a matter of milliseconds. While Sengoku clenched his jaws, Doflamingo cut the call and dashed at Yona, the arch-priestess. His thin strings severed multiple heads of shadow soldiers and Whitebeard pirates as he reached in front of her, grinning like a madman. After staring at those two for a second, Sengoku turned his gaze from there. Daffy would take care of the girl. He didn't have anything to worry about here. He needed to keep the others at bay, too. Next, Sengoku's eyes fell on the man who was blazing everything in his blue fire. Formal title, Fire Fist, then Fire Sultan, and now merely the sin of pride. Sengoku frowned at him. He was doing the most damage amongst the sins, the least being the motor gang. He thought that that girl, Rocky, would be the most dangerous here, and he was right. But she was busy, so she was barely doing any damage to either Whitebeard pirates or Marines. Turning to her, Sengoku found her clashing with fucking Hawkeye Mihawk toe-to-toe. Hawkeye. Mihawk. He might be overall weak, but as long as he had a sword in his hand, he might as well have been called an emperor. And that girl? She was fighting him toe-to-toe. Well, maybe not toe-to-toe. Sengoku was no swordsman, but Mihawk clearly had the upper hand there. Again, Sengoku turned to Wiper. He decided who to send after him. Mad Treasure, one of the Shichibukai. He had a great devil fruit, chain fruit. He could create chains from all over his body. It was in truth an alternate version of Vice Admiral Haine's ability, but the matter of fact was that Mad Treasure could make his chains imitate a sea stone, which easily got him an upper hand. It wasn't actual sea stone, of course. No devil fruit would be able to create that, but it worked similarly. When the chains are wrapped around devil fruit users, they lose most of their powers. Sengoku was about to use his walkie-talkie again to call Mad Treasure, but he saw someone jumping down from the admiral seats from above. The man who wore a red suit and pants below his floating Marine Admiral cape, Akainu Sakazuki, the only admiral who was yet to move, jumped towards Wiper. Magma versus fire, Sengoku reassured himself. Wiper has been taken care of. Or has he? Something large was in the sea, just a few kilometers away from Marineford, and was closing that gap at a rapid speed. The Sea Kings moved off. They ran and fled far from the construct that was swimming under the sea. A metallic object shaped like an earthworm but thousands of times larger, exactly 3 kilometers in length, was striding in the sea like a snake. It was the ancient weapon, Pluton. Who knew all ancient weapons could move underwater? Then again, if Pluton couldn't move through the water in this world where 90% of it is covered in water, then the weapon might even be useless instead. So that only made sense after putting a bit of thought into it.